Masih bersama saya Jasmine Obakar dalam Johor Memilih. Pelbagai perkongsian telah saya kongsikan pada setengah jam awal tadi bersama wartawan Firdaus Azil dan juga penyanyi Haiza. Laporan-laporan yang dibawakan oleh rakan-rakan saya yang berada di lapangan ada di astroawani.com. Kepada anda yang mahukan laporan-laporan itu tadi dan sebagainya, boleh terus ke astroawani.com. Terdapat ruangan lapor langsung di situ. Segalanya ada di situ. Baiklah, saya mahu kongsikan sedikit statistik keluar mengundi bagi Pilihan Raya Dun Johor yang ke-15 setakat jam 2 sahaja ketika ini adalah 40%. SPR menjangkakan targetnya adalah 70% dan itu dah yang kita mahukan kerana kita tahu ada mungkin 2.5 jam lagi untuk rakyat di Johor melakukan tanggungjawab mereka. Baiklah, kita mahu berterus dan teruskan perkongsian saya pada ketika ini dan diskusi saya ini bersama Dr. Serina Rahman, Penganalisis Politik, Political Analyst who is also a visiting fellow at ICS, if I'm pronouncing it right, Yusof Ishak Institute. Thank you, Dr. Serina, for joining me this afternoon at 3:30 for now. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Less than 3 hours away until the polling stations are closed, and we hope for good weather for those who have yet to cast their ballot. Firstly, Doctor, early thoughts in looking into manifestos of political party translating to ballots today, because it has already been more than 10 days of campaigning, etc. And today they've already started casting their ballots. And how do you see the percentage of 40% at 2 o'clock that SPR has already let us know?
Yeah, I think the assumption is that more people will turn out in the afternoon.
Yep.
That is usually, if you're in the rural areas, they'll go out in the afternoon because in the mornings they're doing work and all of this. But then, these few days, it's been raining in the afternoon, so we don't know if that will happen or not. There have been years where the rain has actually stopped people from coming in.
Right. Looking in... Yeah, we hope that they'll come out. Hopefully, looking into like Pilihan Raya Negeri Sarawak, which is which was done in December. At the end of, like, say 4 o'clock, it was raining heavily, and it did stop a lot of people from coming out to vote. So today, the talk of the town is definitely during this Pilihan Raya Negeri Johor is number one. Is definitely young voters. It's definitely top of the town. Everybody is focusing on the young voters because this is the first time young voters are given a chance to cast their ballots, and we want to see what is the offerings of the manifestos that was given by all political parties, whether it does translate, because we also know there is one particular political party which is Muda that is fighting what is the right thing for all this segment of those who are casting their ballots. Doctor?
Yeah, I think it's very clear that all the parties are trying to target the younger voters, not just because of only 18, but then, there's also the automatic voter registration, which then enables more youth to be able to vote. I think there is a lot of excitement over that. However, the percentage of only 18 voters for Johor is only 6%. So the impact of that population is questionable. And then the younger voters between 20 and 29 is about 21%. So while it is a total of about 28%, if you look at 29 years old and below, which is about the age that people are targeting, you actually wonder whether they will have that much of an impact in terms of percentages, but also whether they will go out to vote. So interviews that I've conducted on the ground, focus groups and youth, just random youth, they are generally apathetic and not happy, and they are distrustful of politicians from all sides. So while we are very excited about the under 18 voter, it remains to be seen whether they do turn out. I have actually heard young people saying they're just going to go because they have to, but they might spoil their vote. They don't trust people in authority as usual because they're young, So even though there is Muda, even though all of the parties are actually putting forward quite a lot of candidates below the age of 35, the question is whether the recipients, the voters, are actually buying into the messages. So of course, jobs, employment, and all of this are key issues. But whether there is enough trust for them to go out and believe these candidates and the manifestos and all the promises, because there has been a lot of disappointment over the COVID period because of the pandemic, because of differences in treatment of VIPs and regular people, and this is felt very strongly on the ground.
But like you said, this is the first time, and a lot of them have a trust issue because they think that they have not been treated fairly and there's not enough offerings for them, etc. But if they don't take this chance, Doctor, this would not translate to a change. So how do we ensure that all of them understand the fact that something has to be done in order for a change? Because just now I was talking to an artist or a celebrity singer who went back to Johor from Kuala Lumpur, went back to Johor to cast her ballot, and she, as an artist herself, said, you know, everybody is talking on social media about change, etc. However, it is not translated to voting and to actually exercising. You're right.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of excitement over having the youth voters, but there was less effort put into voter education,
Right.
Politics, governance. These are not things that are taught in school. We shouldn't actually be bringing politics into school, but we should be talking about governance. We should be talking about citizens' duties to vote. What does that mean? Who do we trust? What do we want in government? I think the average person, adults, older voters, don't understand that, for example, a parliamentarian's job is to change laws. They expect their representatives to be on the ground and solving their problems, which is not necessarily what, all of them can do. So there is this misunderstanding between what a voter knows is their right to do, or what is their duty to do, or what that vote actually means for these people. So while we're very excited about the under-18 voter, there is not hardly any effort into telling them what it all means. What are the consequences of not voting? Why should they vote? Who should they vote for? Not put forward by a political party, but by a neutral party, to make them understand the larger issues of governance. I don't think anybody really understands all of that.
Right. Was this not thought through? Because we keep fighting on the issue of automatic voter registration for those who are under 18. However, to prepare those who turn 18 that they can vote, it did not happen in the education system. Did not we think this through? And if it's not too late, what can the education system, like the schools, can actually implement serba sedikit, orang kata, so that the children or those who are in their teenagers would understand what is their responsibility and why they are doing it. Because as when I was, say, in high school, I didn't know the fact that it is a responsibility that my parents had to take for me. So now, after turning 18, it's a responsibility that they can shape their own future.
Yeah, I think with 2.5 hours left of voting, it's too late for Johor. Yeah. To be honest. Yeah. But for GE15, maybe there's something that can be done depending on when that is held. Right. But I think this is something that is conditioning. It's education from young. So if you look at education systems overseas, in the US, for example, or anywhere else, they're taught about governance. They're taught about the different parties, the different roles of each segment in parliament, for example, the difference between state and federal seats. People don't even understand that. Yeah. And if you're in a rural community, all you know is that the politician has to come and help them because they're struggling with the economic problems, with the pandemic. So these things actually start from very young, and they are purely acting as parliamentarians. They're fighting for their rights from a very young age in schools overseas or in international schools. So in that training from, say, 10 years old onwards, they are actually learning what it means to have a voice. Right. Our education system tells students not to have a voice. We tell them not to ask questions. We tell them not to think. So this is the absolute reversal of what they need to do to understand their rights as citizens, as humans, as voters. And we need to reverse so much more in the education system and the approaches to how we teach faith and how we raise our youth so that they are able to think critically and not necessarily along party lines. The danger is that once we allow political subjects in school, it then becomes politicized. And you have a certain party going in to teach only a certain way. So we need to have a neutral entity teaching about governance. How is this done in a country? And these are the things that matter. And this is going to make the youth want to go out and vote and do something for their country, depending on whatever view they have.
Talking about that, I agree with you when you say it's a little bit maybe a bit late for Johor because we only have about 2.5 hours to see what is going to happen. However, we want to look forward and move forward to ensure that other states and for example the next general election would be able to implement such as such so that our children and the younger generations are ready. I also want to ask, you have also an extensive experience being a visiting fellow at the ICS Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore, looking into how maybe we can also get some of your thoughts about how Singapore does it, that maybe Malaysia can also implement or actually see what are the pros and the cons, pros especially in Singapore, that we can implement here in Malaysia.
To be honest, I study Malaysia, so I don't actually know that much about Singapore. But I think they do have young PAP system.
Right.
They get people active and I think interested in their surroundings, and then they discuss the issues. Parliament, I think, is aired for people to watch, and then they do discuss some governance issues in schools. But I think perhaps we can look further afield to get ideas from democratic countries that actually have both governance education, voting education within their school systems. So, the US, even though there are many issues with the US, Scandinavia, there's a lot of, things that we can pick up from the best in education systems overseas. So perhaps we have to look a bit further.
Yeah. All right, I get you there. Maybe we could touch a little bit on women representation. This always is an issue, not say to me, however, I always want, and when I always go on ground, etc., and talk to political analysts, I always wonder why is the women representation so low? In total, there's only 37 candidates, which brings about 15% of the total of those who are contesting. And women voters, surprisingly, women voters are actually half of the number of people who are voting in Johor, which is 2.53 million, and the women voters is 1.29 million. So that is half. However, the representation is only 15% yang bertanding. Ini belum lagi yang menang. Jadi, is this a little bit worrying? Because maybe I am from Johor and now I am in KL. Sometimes I feel like I want to go back to Johor and help those there to, actually ask and see, wonder what is happening and why is this happening?
Unfortunately, I think this is more of a cultural issue.
Yeah.
There are two sides to this. Many women are raised, and their peers, their family, their spouses tell them this is not something that they should be involved in. And if you go back into culture, and sometimes also tinged by faith, the idea is that the woman's place is in the home. And even for her to go out and get a job, there are limits. And when a woman goes home, she leaves her job at the doorstep, becomes a mother, she becomes a wife. And so to be a political activist, to be active on the ground means you leave your family behind, to be honest, right? So a lot of families, a lot of husbands will not accept it. A lot of parents will not allow their children, their daughters, to get involved at a very young age with politicking, right? Not say politicking, but political activism.
Right.
So you have that whole cultural baggage that a woman has to overcome in order to join this. And then we have a very patriarchal system. So to be honest, while it's wonderful to see young girls standing up, like Marina or Muda has a few young girls standing as candidates, when you speak to voters, really the views that they get, especially from the older males, are really quite condescending.
Right.
And, because I use ethnography and anthropology to study my subject,
Right.
you have to consider where the women's position is in the social hierarchy.
Right.
And to be honest, the women's position is quite low, and a single young woman is at the bottom of the hierarchy. So when you have a young lady standing up as a candidate, everybody's like more focused on how pretty she is, how nicely she speaks. But the question at the back of their minds is, what can she do? She's quite wet behind the ears. She's just a young girl. She doesn't have the experience, and there's a lot of condescension. It's very sad because I think the energy, the idealism, the intentions of these young candidates are great. Right. But we have to overcome these views from the voters, especially the older male voters. And for a lot of times, the misogyny comes from females. Women who are older, married, the aunties, they really do not want to see a girl doing this because they think this is not their place. And they might vote for a guy just because of that. There's a lot of latent chauvinism which exists, that a young female candidate has to overcome. It is very sad. But these are the cultural issues that we need to overcome in order for more of these women to be able to come out and take a stand. So there are huge hurdles that they have to overcome. I do not envy them. It's hard.
Talking about cultural issues, this is something quite concerning because I have two girls myself, and I think and I would have thought that this is something that is no longer a viable argument, whether we see how women are in their social status and whether they are good in this and good in that. They should be, considered the same when we talk about their experience and also what they have to offer. I hope, Dr. Serina, you can hold on. We'll continue this conversation. I want to talk to you about later on about the opening of the borders on the 1st of April. Later after the break, kita akan berehat seketika. Jangan ke mana-mana. Kembali bersama Johor Memilih selepas ini. Laporan komprehensif mengenai Johor Memilih bersama saya Jasmine Abu Bakar dan bersama rakan-rakan setugas saya yang lain pada sebelum dan selepas ini. Rakan-rakan di lapangan juga masih giat berada di Johor, sekitar Johor untuk mendapatkan laporan terkini, perkembangan dan sebagainya. Semua itu anda boleh dapat di astroawani.com, lapor langsung juga di situ dan semua platform astroawani.com, di Instagram, Facebook dan sebagainya. Tadi saya ada berbual dengan Dr. Serina Rahman, seorang analis politik yang seronok saya berbual dengan dia kerana pelbagai perkongsian yang dapat diberikan mengenai pengundi muda dan juga representasi wanita dan sebagainya. Dan ini adalah salah satu fokus dan tumpuan yang akan berlaku tidak lama lagi pada 1 April. Dr. Serina, thank you for still being here with me, accompanying me over this last maybe 10-15 minutes.
Hi.
Dr. Serina Rahman is also a visiting fellow at the ICS Yusof Ishak Institute. So just now I did tell you we wanted to touch on the opening of the borders that's going to happen on the 1st of April. After 2 years of closure, now Malaysians, particularly Johorians. Yesterday I met with my mum. My mum was saying, oh, I can't wait to go to Johor, just to go to Woodlands, just to go to Mustafa, etc. Looking forward to the opening of the borders as announced by the Prime Minister earlier this week. Having first-hand experience in how that affected them previously, Johorians, when I'm saying that, will this also push voting decisions making by Johorians? Because they know what happened to them. They understand what is the, the whole situation when 2 years the borders was closed. They have family, and their habits have been cut. Some habits were just basically going to Woodlands, getting fruits, for example. Dr. Serina.
Yeah, I was one of those that used to commute daily and didn't. So I was very grateful to be on the right side of the border when the border slammed shut. Otherwise, we stuck there for 3 years like so many people. I think it is a huge mental relief for Johorians to hear that the border will be opening. It's good for the economy, it's good for mental well-being, it's good for those whose families are separated, for them to be able to come back regularly. We have had, of course, the VTL. But the VTL is a great announcement, but very difficult to get tickets. I mean, you have 1,000 over tickets. There used to be 300,000 people that commuted every day. So clearly it is not enough. Now they've increased the quota, but it is still very difficult to be able to cross the border by land. Whether it will affect the voting is a big question. Because again, as I mentioned with the youth voters, people are a little bit more dubious about claims made by politicians. So I think, and it's also quite visible that this border opening issue has become politicized. So you have the entities who are influential in coming to the decision, you have the entities who are claiming credit for the decision, you have the opposition parties who are saying it's political. It has become an issue that is tossed about like a ping pong ball. Really what the people want to know is that the border is going to open, the economy is going to recover, they're reunited with families. The pandemic is dealt with and it's become endemic. So whether it affects the vote, the question I think lies with whether people are actually giving the politicians the credit that they claim. Because I think for many people, they're a little bit more dubious about believing claims by politicians. So while they want this to happen and they're very happy, I'm a little bit doubtful as to whether this will influence voting decisions, because I think across the board there is a lot of distrust. And this distrust is with all sides of the political divide. I think the pandemic, the floods have left people a little bit burnt in terms of the differences between treatment to VIPs, celebrities, the wealthy, and regular people in times of SOP restrictions or breaking of the rules. So there's a lot of dissatisfaction in that. There's a lot of unhappiness in the sense that people are not really helping those in need. People are confused by pandemic restrictions and regulations. They're unhappy that the economy has fallen so far as a result of this. They don't understand that there are also global issues. They just feel it very personally. So whether they believe any of the politicians who are claiming credit or countering that credit in any way is, I think, a whole different question. If we can get voter turnout to reach 60 plus 70, that in itself is an achievement. And whether they're voting because they've had, it's a traditional thing to vote for a certain party, or whether they feel like maybe this party is a breath of fresh air, we won't know until the results are in. I'm doubtful whether this is a specific issue that influences the vote, because I think there is a lot of apathy, a lot of dissatisfaction, and a lot of distrust that I hear from the ground. So yes, it's great news, but it might not necessarily influence the vote.
Dr. Serina, as you said, you are also directly affected, even though you're not casting your vote as a Johorian today. I'm sure this decision that was made also contributes to your schedule and how you commute, etc. So what are your hopes, maybe, because we understand maybe you're not Johorian, however you do go through the same experience as the Johorians did. Dr. Serina, a little bit on your personal hopes on this opening of borders on the 1st of April.
It'd be great if the borders open, because I think everybody around me, I live in a kampung in Gelambata, so everybody around me is affected by the border closure. So many people lost their jobs, so many people are working in Singapore. If the borders open, investments come back, Singaporeans come back, then clearly Johor Bahru will have better business, because so many F&B services suffered. For me personally, I abandoned my office for 2.5 years. I was very lucky because I could still work from home. But there were many who could not. It would be good to see people around me suddenly smiling again and thinking that, there's money to be spent, money to be earned, there's jobs that they can take. The question is whether Singapore will open the borders at the same time. Whether Singapore will want to take those commuters again to work, because things have changed. So yes, the borders would be nice to have it open. I'm really grateful to be here in Johor with family. This is home, so I'm quite okay. But to be able to go in and out freely would be easier. Like if I have to go in for work, I'm petrified that I will be there and not be able to come back. And this is what happened to so many people who chose to stay and were separated from family for 2 years, and that is traumatic, really.
Dr. Serina, economic stability, that is what most political party manifestos offer. Political and also economic stability. And this is widely important to Johorians. Businesses, for example, in southern region that rely on buying power of Singaporeans can now look forward to having their business alive again. So what assurance can the winning political party give to ensure safety health-wise and also economic stability? Because when I went back to Johor Bahru, looking at the near the tambak, etc., near Sungai Segit, for example, a lot of shops are closing. Yes, however, there are also more businesses that cater to the younger generations. However, these younger generations would have a slightly more economic stability and an extra income when the borders open and you see the buying power of Singaporeans.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I think businesses in Johor Bahru suffered greatly without, the weekend Singaporeans holidaying, coming in to spend money, to shop, to go to the spas, to fix their cars, etc. So it's been very hard for a lot of businesses. I think many have actually closed. Johor has suffered tremendously. Hotels have closed, service businesses, F&B have closed, and there are many statistics on that. Some have opened up again because the restrictions related to COVID have, eased, so people are able to move. So we do have domestic tourists, for example. But for Johor itself, it was hurt, especially hurt during the pandemic, because so much depends on the Singaporean and other visitors that come in through Singapore. So economic stability is important. whoever's in power, as long as it's not, using this as a political bait. We do need the economy to stabilize, and I think for Johor that really does hinge on Singapore and Singaporeans being able to come in. It hinges on Johorians being able to go into Singapore to work, because then you have the spending power that you're talking about, right? Because if our borders remain closed, then not everybody has jobs still. Where are the job opportunities? So this is what is needed, and hopefully the borders reopening will be able to do that, even though we are still worried about Omicron. But as we've heard, it is endemic, and to be honest, it's everywhere. So, the question really, if everybody is vaxxed and boosted, and hopefully this becomes, the percentages get higher, then perhaps, this COVID can just become a flu, and we can be less worried about it if we take all the right precautions.
Dr. Serina, I would like to say thank you very much for joining Astro AWANI and also Johor Memilih to share a little bit of your thoughts on the Johor elections. We wish you well in Johor. I hope you can commute easily for work, etc. in Singapore come 1st April. Thank you very much, Dr. Serina.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Take care.